Hey friends, welcome back to the podcast. I have a really awesome guest today. I know that you are all going to enjoy this conversation because it is for all of us. But I have Kendra Nielsen here. She is a licensed therapist and she specifically works with parents who are feeling overwhelmed and burnt out and also just want all of the best for their families and want to be the best parents, the best partners, the best everything, and really need some help figuring out how to navigate the seasons that are overwhelming. Kendra, welcome. I'd love for you to share just a little bit of your story, you, your family, why you're here, all of that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me, first of all. I am a therapist. Like you said, I'm actually a personal trainer. I don't do a lot with that anymore, but I love health. I love whole health. I love wellness, obviously, mental health. I am a mother of four, and we often have exchange students too. So I sometimes have five kids at home. It's a little bit crazy. Business owner, podcaster, you name it. Plus, as a mom, you're also like everything else, a doctor, a taxi driver, laundry person, all the things. Yeah, I live in Idaho and I love it. I didn't love it at first. I grew up in Wisconsin and I really enjoy good food and vegetables. Yeah, I don't know what else you want to know.
I love that. I love vegetables. That's always like a winner as an intro.
Most people are like, ew, vegetables, gross. I love them.
Yeah, exactly. So, our topic today is how to take care of yourself as a mom when you're really burnt out. So, I'm sure that all of us are like, oh, interesting. That sounds like it could be for me, right? So,
Mhm.
let's just talk about overwhelm, burnout in motherhood specifically. Like, I would love for you to talk about how do we know if it's normal as a mom to feel this way, or are we actually in burnout? Are we overwhelmed? What are the emotions that show up? And we can go into why is that so common?
Yeah, that is a good question. Actually, I would say the majority of my clients right now are moms that are in the thick of parenting. They have kids ranging in ages from like newborn into teenagers, and they're just at their max. Like they're super overwhelmed, super exhausted, burnt out, and just really wondering, like, why is life so hard? Is it supposed to be this hard? Because it feels pretty hard. And not really understanding why they are experiencing such intense levels of disconnection, low energy. And I know you talked about this as well with hormones, but not having joy in things they used to enjoy, feeling really anxious, feeling very depressed, but not even necessarily putting that label on it. Like just feeling like they're not themselves, like remembering themselves in college or even high school, feeling way better, way more energized, way more fulfilled, and wondering, why can't I get that now? And I think there is this component that, yes, it is a hard stage of life, and it doesn't have to be that way. I won't go too much into that, but yeah, that is what I see in my clients.
So, one thing that just came up for me as you're saying that is it's really common for us as younger moms to hear from older moms that was the best season of my life.
Yeah.
And it feels like a lot. So, how do we manage the two? Because I love having younger kids. I love being in this season. I think that the level of need for me is probably the highest that it'll ever be. And that is so special in such an amazing way, right? That we're the mom, we're the one they want. These little people need us so much. And also, like, we know the flip side of that is it's exhausting. So, I would love to hear your thoughts on like, holding the emotions of both things when you're overwhelmed, essentially.
Yeah, that is a good question. And I actually, to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised, even though I love to hear what you're saying. People do say that this is like the best stage of life, but my answer to that, because of all my clients that are coming in, is that is not what my clients are saying. My clients are in the thick of that exhaustion and they're like, I cannot wait till they can buckle themselves in their car seat. I cannot wait until they don't need me to do everything for them. Like they're like middle school age or something like that. So There is for sure both. And I'm glad that there's people out there that really enjoy those younger stages. But I think that there is a space to hold both of those without a key component, I think, is investing in yourself and finding answers so that you can enjoy this stage that is so fleeting, right? There's this paradox where both do exist. I can be completely exhausted and I can be so excited that my kids are growing up and I get to experience all these fun things they're learning and their curiosity and their joy. Like they both exist. And I know you know that as a mom. But I would say a key component of that is intentional self care. And I almost want to throw up just saying that because when I would hear that word as a mother, I'm like, oh my gosh, no, that's only for people that have a bougie life and can do all of those things. That's not for the everyday mom. But it's this intentional self care and investing in yourself.
I think that it's more women who are older, like their kids are grown, that they look back and they're like, man, I missed that season. And I have been told that so much that I really try to be present in it. And I love having little kids, like I said, and very much it is nice when they can buckle themselves in car seats because I'm at this stage now when my youngest is going to be 3 in a week. And I'm like, oh, this is, he can put on his own shoes some of the time. I just went on a trip with just my 10-year-old and I was like, who am I? She doesn't even need me for anything. We were flying and I'm like, if you were here by yourself, like, how would you do this? And this is our gate. This is how we do it. And I'm like, good. I'm glad to know you can. But it's just completely mind blowing to me to be more in this season where a 3-year-old is not very self sufficient, but they're a lot more self sufficient than a baby.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
not crying all the
Yeah.
time and all the things. So anyway, I think it's just interesting to me to try to really protect boundaries, take care of myself in this season, and also make sure that I'm soaking it up. So I think that's what I was
Mhm.
alluding to. But I would love to hear in our culture, social media, just moms talking to each other. It's easy to be negative, essentially, or easy to like only focus on the things that are going wrong or like how overwhelmed we are, how tired we are. What do you think are some of the root causes of everyone feeling that way in
Yeah.
motherhood?
It comes down to us running on empty. We cannot succeed well as mothers, as women, as individuals if we are so depleted. And I think the things that we expect of ourselves, we would never in a million years expect for our children, our spouse, our best friend. We keep such unrealistic paces and we assume that we're the exception and that it's going to be okay. But so many of the women, it makes me so sad. It hurts my heart when I ask them, like, what do you like to do? They don't know what their hobbies are. They don't work on strengths or they don't do things that make them feel alive. They don't feel like they have interests. There's so many things that they don't do because they invest so much in their kids. And I'll share a personal story with that. One of my favorite things about being a parent is helping my kids establish or develop their talents and their interests. So I was getting my kids in all these different things. I was helping support them and I was feeling really depleted. And I know all these things. And eventually I was like, wait a second. If I'm putting in this much time and energy and money, resources into my children, I do not need to feel bad about doing something like that for myself. So that means classes for myself. That trying to make some sort of equality and part of that comes down to unmet needs. Like I tell my clients, every one of them, to explore those needs that they have that are not being met. So often it's not because our husband doesn't want us to have these things. It's not because our kids refuse to give us time. It's because we have such unrealistic expectations for ourselves. And like I said, go back to that. What you're doing to yourself, would you want your own child to do to themselves when they grow up?
I actually have said some of those exact same things, and I haven't had someone necessarily say them the same way to me. So I feel very validated in just that. It is unrealistic expectations. And that would be, I would say, probably like my nemesis is my own unrealistic expectations for myself. But I've said the exact same thing where it's, I wouldn't expect my best friend to do this. I wouldn't expect my sister to, but like I think I can for some reason. And then I'm hard on myself when I'm like, oh, I can't do 4 people's jobs. Like I can only do maybe just one person's job. And I think that is huge. So, what are some of the tools that you use when you're working with your clients and they're like, okay, they figure out they have unmet needs, they figure out they don't remember who they are or what they like. And it's essentially like, as hard as it is to say, it's on us. It's not our husband's fault. It's not our kids' fault. Like, we're doing it to ourselves, which is the hardest thing to hear, but also sometimes the best because that means we can change it. So, what are some of the tools that you use?
I have so many resources that I love doing, and everybody's a little bit different, but I'm going to mention some of my favorites. One thing that you just said sparked that too. There's one thing I haven't found anywhere on the internet, but my husband and I created it ourselves. It's the ownership model or the victim cycle. And it's really about taking ownership because you said like it's on us. And that's so true. And that doesn't have to be like a weight, that can actually be really empowering. Okay, there's small things that I can do. And then I can just keep building little by little. That model shows us like, when are we stuck? When are we below that line? When are we getting in this victim mentality that we are not moving forward? And what are some small steps we can do to move up that ladder into ownership? Like every one of these tools could be a whole episode, so I won't go too much into it. But another thing is assertiveness. So many women, they think, oh, I am definitely assertive, or like I speak up for myself. But when I really break it down into like little steps, okay, this is what passivity looks like. This is what aggression looks like. These are like the kind of the in between. And this is really how you advocate for yourself and really give them examples. And they're like, oh, I am so much more passive and aggressive than I realized. And no wonder I'm not getting my needs met because I'm not communicating them in a way that people can understand. So that's another one. Once you get more assertive, it gets easier to establish boundaries and maintain boundaries and recognize that other people are not responsible for protecting your boundaries and your values and upholding those. Like it's on you. Just like you said, it is on us. And again, can be empowering if you allow it to be. And then another one is I just love habit tracking. So many of us are very complacent and just existing in life. And I am all about, yeah, you can do that and just be the average American that is obese, overwhelmed, depressed, anxious, or you can be the one that makes an intentional plan and starts doing those little steps that will lead to a healthier, more fulfilling lifestyle. But there's no room for complacency if you really want to have a more joyful, happy, fulfilling life. So those are some of my favorite tools, but I have a whole bunch more.
So, as boundaries are like a big topic that everyone's, oh, yeah, boundaries, I should have boundaries. But I think that it would be really helpful to break it down in the context of a mom who is overwhelmed, struggling to keep up with all of the high standards that she has for herself. What does that look like? I think it's easy to assume like it's just, oh, yeah, I'm not going to let my stepsister who is not a great person in my life, like she's not coming to Christmas. Like we can feel like those are the boundaries, but I'm sure there's just so much more that's like day to day within your, I would assume boundaries with yourself could be really important, especially with
Absolutely.
this ownership piece. So I would love to hear a few boundaries examples that could really make a difference that maybe people don't think of as boundaries.
Yeah, this is always a very tricky one. And we have to go through it like multiple sessions with my clients because it is
Absolutely.
very confusing and it really depends on the person. So, for example, say I have a high need for freedom, autonomy, personal time in order to recover and be my best self. I know that, but my spouse doesn't need that. I can just continue to build in that resentfulness and that anger and that overwhelm, or I can recognize, oh, I'm starting to see that these key times when I'm really triggered, I'm not my best self, I'm like terrible after 7. And this is where the assertiveness and advocacy comes in, where I sit down with him and be like, hey, look, I am feeling this way. I feel like I'm not my best self after 7 o'clock. I get up really early. I say things that I regret. I don't like myself. And then I have all this shame. can you help me explore this? And this could even be you on your own beforehand, but sometimes it helps to bounce ideas off of somebody that you really love and admire. And you can just break it down. So it could be different for everybody, but say for me, it could be maybe I could take the kids in the morning and I could get them ready for school and I could be the chief for the mornings because that's when I'm my best self. And in the evenings, you do bedtime and I get 30 minutes by myself. Nobody's talking to me and I'm going to go somewhere where I don't interrupt anyone else's schedule. And people know that's just me recovering and taking some me time. Now, knowing, he agrees with that. And this is the boundary, this parameter that I've set, and think of it like a fence. I love thinking about a protective fence around things you really value. So the first thing that I do when we talk about boundaries is people have to find out what their top like 5 values are. And then when even more than that, like their top 3, what do you really want to protect? And then designing your boundaries in ways that are very simple and they don't require a lot from other people necessarily, and that you feel like you can maintain realistically. Say if my husband didn't want to do that or he kept walking in the room when I was reading, that does not mean that I can just be really rude and resentful and passive aggressive. That means that, like, maybe not in the moment because at 7 o'clock I'm not my best self, but maybe the next day I'd be like, remember how we talked about my boundaries? Remember how I'm trying to be more assertive? You came in the room and I felt really frustrated, but I don't want to talk about it then because I was really triggered. Let's problem solve. What can we do so that's not a problem moving forward? Do we need to change something about that? Again, that's advocating for yourself. That's being assertive. That's being willing to be flexible without abandoning your boundaries.
I think sometimes those kind of things, it can feel unrealistic when you're just like in the swirliness of trying to keep up with everything, right? And it's like, oh, okay, that would be nice, but that time of night is crazy and the dishes aren't done. And so sometimes it's, for me, that is a hard time of day typically. And not that it's like even that we're grumpy or anything. Sometimes we are, I'll be honest, but it's not like it's always like that. But I feel like I have to reverse engineer it so often where I'm like, I need to go to bed earlier and I want time with my husband before that. And I want the kids in bed at the time that they need to go to bed so that those things can happen. And that means the dishes need to be done before they go to bed. And that means dinner needs to be at this time. And it's like you have to like back all these things up to say, this is my priority, is my husband and I get however much time together before bed, or sometimes I get time by myself or whatever it is, so we can actually wind down, so we can go to bed on time, so we can sleep well, so we can get up and work out, like all of the things. It just, they all stack on each other. So I know that can feel overwhelming. And I assume that's where habit tracking comes in, right? Do
Do you mind if I jump into that a little bit? You
Yeah, go
said
for it.
you said that there's a lot of things competing for your time and attention and that you value. Like you want to spend time with your husband. So quality time or family is a high priority. So is a clean house. So cleanliness or order is a high value. And you have all of these competing values. And it comes down to, yeah, you do have to somewhat prioritize. And let's go back to that initial thing we said. What would you want your best friend to do? You probably tell your best friend, hey, April, you can't do it all. And we're all doing the best that we can. Let's just let's simplify this and let's think about what your best self would do, recognizing that your best self is also not going to be able to do everything. They have to do it like with wisdom and order. You're not going to be able to do every single thing, but there is a place for things. And what I almost say this so much that my audience like rolls their eyes probably, but I always go back to it. If it's important to you, you'll find a way. If not, you'll find an excuse. And mothers are the masters of excuses. They will be like, oh, I can't work out because my kids always need me. I can't get up that early because I go to bed late because my kids, like, it's excuse after excuse. I'm like, you are not prioritizing yourself and your family is suffering. You are for sure suffering, but ultimately your family is suffering because you are on empty and you are not a pleasant human anymore. We need to work on you. And that's what I really get into, dad or mom, but we all really struggle with that.
Yeah, I think that has been something that has been helpful with my unrealistic expectations is I used to have, I'm sure I still have excuses, but I used to have more excuses. My husband would come home and I'd be like, "Ugh, I wanted to have the kitchen clean, but this happened and this happened." And it just turned into like a complaining thing. And so I've started to be like, you know what? Like he'll come home. He's not coming home and being like, why isn't the kitchen clean? But that's what I always am like, oh, but I wanted to. And now it's just so much easier to say, you know what? It wasn't the most important thing. Like the
Yeah.
kitchen wasn't the most important thing. The laundry wasn't the most important thing. Like it was my kids. Like we were outside, we were having a great time together. Those are the memories I want them to have. And I trust myself that eventually the house will get clean. Like I do not like my house to be dirty. So I'm going to do it. Now, is it serving me well? Like I have to see what I'm sacrificing and go and pay attention to that regularly. But it has helped me a lot to not have that like guilt or shame where I'm just like, okay, that wasn't a priority. And then it doesn't bring us down that spiral. Okay. So any last thoughts when you're talking to the mom who's overwhelmed, wants to do things the best way possible? What would be like a first step from what we've talked about, or just like where would they start to figure out where they need to get out of the hole or get out of the spiral?
Honestly, I guess I have to put in this plug. Not everyone needs therapy, but I'd say it starts with therapy or investing in yourself, whether that's a course, whether that's podcast episodes, that's reading, whatever it is. I know there's something so beneficial to getting expert help for things like this. But another key component that I forgot about when you were talking about this, like it sounds like you're a little bit further along in working through some of that shame, and you have developed something that you didn't even label it as this, but that self-compassion and that validation is so important in our healing journey. And you're starting to do that. I can tell from the way that you're talking. But being able to get to that space where you can say something like, it wasn't most important. Like I tell my clients, whenever you say should, oh, I should have done the dishes. I should have done the laundry. I shouldn't have yelled at the kids. You could say, I could have done the laundry. I could have done the dishes. And there's something that I valued more that is more beneficial for my family or for my peace of mind. And doing that more and more, changing those neural pathways, creating a different highway, a super highway for those thoughts that allow for more compassion, that allow for self-care. But yeah, I would say that biggest thing, that first step is really challenge that scarcity mindset that you don't have enough time, you don't have enough money. Really challenge those excuses and start investing in yourself. Maybe that's therapy, maybe that's a course, and address these things because, like with what you probably mention a lot, we don't want to keep putting band-aids on things. We want to get to that core issue and heal some of that childhood trauma or those other things that are happening that are keeping us stuck in that place where we cannot be our best selves for ourselves or for our family.
I just couldn't agree with that more because when we're looking at nourishment, a lot of times it is essentially getting out of our own way mentally with a guilt and shame spiral of I should have eaten that differently. And it does come down to victim mentality of I could do it if someone's not letting me or I'm not letting myself or whatever that looks like. And so I could see that definitely spills over into other areas of life too. So this is so good, Kendra. Thank you so much for chatting with us. And we'll put your links in the show notes. But do you have anything specific as a first step that you would want to send anyone to when they're listening to this?
I would just say check out my podcast, Fulfillment Therapy, or I'm on all the social media stuff. You can find me on everything. And yeah, I have some great courses coming out about some of these things. Like sometimes people are like, I just don't have the time and I'm not severe enough that I need that. And so I'm going to be releasing a bunch of mental health courses in January that is just about that. Okay, here's 3 months for you to dive into parenting, personal growth, marriage. And this is just from a therapist, the best tools to really do what I can in the comfort of my own home to maximize that area of my life in maybe ways that I hadn't been before. And yeah, you can check that out, fulfillmenttherapy.org.
Thank you so much, Kendra.
Of course. Thanks for having me.